This video is a preview of the Lions-Chiefs Thursday Night Football opener to the NFL season. Look, the NFL either believes in what the Lions are doing and what the Lions are building and in some of the hype, I guess, and wants to showcase that immediately against the defending Super Bowl champions, or they wanted to pop that bubble as soon as possible and chose Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes to do it. There's probably some middle ground there, truth, on either side. But this is going to be the biggest stage for an NFL game, really until the playoffs, from the standpoint of the entire football world will be watching on Thursday night. Regardless of why any of us thinks the NFL chose the Detroit Lions, and I think it's a whole lot more of the former than any other reason, Dan Campbell and company got a chance to make a huge statement in front of that national or worldwide audience on Thursday Night Football. I think they're up to the task, to be honest with you. Let's put it this way. I believe that the roster that Brad Holmes has put together is ready to compete with anyone, and that includes the Chiefs in Kansas City. Clearly, the NFL would prefer an offensive showdown, a shootout, I should say. And I think the Lions will be up to the task there, to be honest with you. The Chiefs will score, clearly. They're going to figure out a way to score. They'll figure out a way to move the football, adjust and adapt to what people do. And the Lions, I think, with Ben Johnson returning as the offensive coordinator, he's fantastic. He's got a unique run game, very creative manner of attacking the boundary, of setting people up with formations, with similar motions, and then revealing his true intentions later on in the game. The Lions finished 2022 on a tear. Ended up fifth in the league in scoring, I believe, almost 27 points per game, 26.6. Jared Goff went 9 or 10 games to finish the season without a turnover, helped the Lions finish on the 8-2 streak. And let's be honest, if it weren't for their surprising loss to the Carolina Panthers, they would have been in the playoffs. But that's not where I'm going with this preview in terms of talking about the offense. Even though the Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, a super talented tight end, and Sam Laporta, and Ben Johnson essentially chose to return or come back, which is going to help this offense significantly. And I don't think there's a really high chance that Ben Johnson returns after this year, because I expect them to play well. I expect them to execute and score a lot of points again. Having said all that, to be honest with you, where I'll begin this preview, where I want to focus on and where I think is actually the biggest part of determining this game, is the Lions' defense. I think it's the defense under Aaron Glenn that both has a lot to prove, because there's a whole lot of new pieces over there, and I think has the ability to justify the hype. To be honest with you, I can't wait to see this group of players put to the test by Mahomes, Reid, guys like Travis Kelce, and all the good or solid wide receivers that they've accumulated over there in Kansas City since they got rid of Tyreek Hill. You will hear me flipping through some papers, because I've got a lot typed up here. So I am most interested in the DB group from an observation standpoint. Some of the new pieces, Cam Sutton, combining with guys who've been there, Emmanuel, and my new favorite guy, or one of my new favorite guys, CJ Gardner-Johnson. His energy, his focus, and his commitment sticks out on film like that play right there, pretty much telling everybody the routes that were coming. Personally, the player on the Lions that I prefer and root for the most is obviously James Houston IV. So it probably makes it tough for me to be as impartial as I need to. But in the case of the DB core, I don't think it's me being a homer in terms of rooting for guys. When they add C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a guy who had 6 interceptions last year, plays all over the place like you see from some of these clips, it brings a whole new element to this Lions defense, just him. And then when you add Brian Branch to that, he's an incredibly impressive safety from Alabama. Very balanced, very multiple. Tackles like a load, like you see there, hitting Cole Beasley in the preseason. Both of these guys are very versatile. They can play the nickel. They can come downhill and tackle, as you see. They can line up a half-field safety. Of the two, Gardner-Johnson or Branch, I would think C.J. Gardner-Johnson would be more capable as a middle-of-the-field free safety. But the Lions already have a guy there who's really good at it. They're going to get the most attention is Aiden Hutchinson, for me at least, and James Houston IV. But the D tackles are very underrated as well. Isaiah Buggs, Aleem McNeil, and Levi, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, the guy who's coming back this year. from sitting out pretty much all of last year. And then John Kaminsky, a guy I did a film study video of earlier in the preseason or offseason, I should say. He's more of a D-end hybrid, but they play him on the edge often. He's a unique player, Kaminsky. He can play in like a 4-eye or a 3 technique where he's responsible for B-gap. He played a lot of edge in the preseason this year. He played some edge position last year. Super underrated player. And when you look at the Lions team last year, when Kaminsky was able to come back and play a lot of snaps, and when James Houston IV was inserted into the lineup, not necessarily as a starter, but as a guy who played snaps on pass situations, obvious pass downs, those two guys being available on the field a lot really seemed to liven up and supercharge this Lions defense. And then when you look at some of the players they've added, Sutton, Branch, Gardner-Johnson, Jack Campbell, who I haven't even mentioned yet, can that group stop Mahomes and company for 60 minutes in Arrowhead on opening night for the NFL? That's a tall task. Andy Reid's got a great ability to make adjustments based on the weakness of your defense. Everybody knows that. You got that stable of, like I said, dangerous but underrated wide receivers that Mahomes has to rely on now because he doesn't have, Tyreek Hill, the superstar. I want to talk about, to be honest with you, something that Reid and Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy, who's since gone to Washington, get credit for being really good at, and I've just cited them for it as well. But I want to talk about how the Lions probably have a blueprint or a team to look at in terms of trying to disrupt this Chiefs offense, maybe make them one-dimensional. How much do you think the Chiefs will score on this defense, first of all? I don't think it's a situation where the Lions have to win a shootout. In fact, while it's a difficult thing to project, because we haven't seen the Lions defense out there, full force, all the starters, playing 60 minutes, particularly not against people like Mahomes and Andy Reid, you got to give credit to Brad Holmes for adding considerable talent, all the guys we've talked about, drafting Jack Campbell, who's shown a natural ability to fit run plays perfectly in the preseason. They've got legit pieces over there and depth at every level. If all those pieces are aligned and playing in a coordinated manner, what do you think is the realistic number to hold the Chiefs down to? When I usually do predictions, I usually am looking at, to be honest with you, a range of possible scores. Meaning, I'm looking at what could be the possibility, the various possibilities with 0 turnovers, with 1 turnover on either side, and that's my range. And then, sometimes I'll project if a team is turnover prone, what it would look like if one team turns the ball over twice and the other team doesn't turn it over at all. That's generally what I try to do. I think predicting a number as points allowed is difficult in this case. With so many new players added to the Lions defense, though, and the talent that's out there at corner and DB and safety, I think you have to give them the opportunity to hold this Chiefs team down, at least for a period of time. You can debate for yourself what the score might look like, but there's enough athleticism over there, speed, and tackling ability to win a lot of games at the NFL level in 2023. In their 8-2 finish last year to the 2022 season, the Lions, I think, allowed a touch over 20 points per game. In that stretch, you had 2 wins over the Packers, who otherwise had a winning record against the NFL last year, even though they weren't a great team. And then the Lions had 3 wins over playoff teams, the Jags, Vikings, and Giants. They also added a second win in New York, a 20-17 win over the Jets. Prior to that, during their 1-6 start, they allowed 27 or more points in every game but one. Now, which defense shows up in this Thursday night? Which defense shows up in Kansas City? Well, I guess in a literal sense, neither, because they've got so many new players. It's a new season. There's clearly increased expectations and probably even increased standards, higher standards for this entire Lions team. I think it's damn near impossible to hold Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and company below 24, 27 points consistently. But for the Lions, I think if they are able to get the Chiefs down below what I would say is the watermark or the threshold for having a good chance to win, which is 23 or 24 points, I think they got a great chance to win, meaning the Lions. I think they're going to generate at least 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals, or 3 touchdowns and a field goal, or perhaps 2 across 9 or 10 or 11 possessions. And look, that's no knock against the Chiefs defense at all. Okay, they've had a lot of underrated rookies last year who shined throughout the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. Missing Chris Jones, which it looks like at this point as I record this Monday night, the Chiefs will play without him, is a huge blow, clearly. But they have a lot of young players. Trent McDuffie, they drafted last year. George Karlaftis, they drafted last year. Joshua Williams, Leo Chenal, Brian Cook, who I think didn't play for much of the season but had an impact late. They had a lot of young players have an impact, particularly in the playoffs. So I'm not denigrating the Chiefs' defense at all when I say that I think the Lions can go in there and score 24 points or more, or 27. I think that's the number that you should be shooting for if you're realistically trying to go in there and beat Kansas City. And let me break this down for you. In the last 2 years, 2021 and 2022, when the Chiefs have scored 24 points or more, they're 25-5 when scoring 24 or more points. When they're held below 24 points, they've been held there 10 times in the last 2 years, combining 2021 and 2022. When they've been held below 24 points, they're 6-4. 6-4 is still a winning record, but it's not 25-5. Now, right on that split, and you can already tell the team that I'm going to talk about because I'm showing the film now. Right on that split in terms of the 24 points or less allowed, or less than 24 points, is a couple of games against the Bengals. The Chiefs and Bengals played 4 games against each other overall, 2021, 2022. I'm a Ravens fan who's watched a ton of Bengals film, and I just respect the heck out of what they do on defense because they just get after Mahomes and they cover people and they're physical. Let's go over briefly some of the games they've played and why I think that Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, and the whole Lions defensive staff have hopefully, and I actually think they have, looked at Bengals film against the Chiefs leading up to this matchup. What did the Bengals do? Well, 2021, late week 17, they get a 34-31 win over the Chiefs in Cincinnati. After that, listen to the scores. And tell me if this is Mahomes-like, or Andy Reid-like, or Eric Bieniemy-like. You got what some people thought was a shocking loss in the AFC title game of 2021 playoffs. I didn't think it was shocking because I had watched the Bengals do this stuff to multiple teams that year, including the Ravens. And then 2022 was the same story in terms of the Bengals defense holding down Mahomes and Reid. You had a 27-24 loss at Cincinnati in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, granted, the Chiefs did win 23-20 last year in the AFC title game at home before beating the Eagles in a shootout in the Super Bowl. If it were not for a matchup that the Chiefs finally figured out in the third game in the regular season game last year of 2022, I think the Bengals probably win that AFC title game last year. And the matchup I'm talking about is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or MVS as he's known, against Mike Hilton, the nickel corner or nickel safety for the Bengals, who's a fantastic football player. Extrapolate this a little further, this 23-24 point barrier or threshold. The Chiefs have finished 2021 and 2022 on a tear from like the week 6 or week 7 point onward. Basically the 3rd or 4th week in October to the rest of the season. Here's what they've done. 2021, they won 10 of their last 11 regular season games. 2021, 9 of their last 10. 2022, they won 10 of their last 11. That's 19-2. Guess who the 2 losses are against in the regular season I'm talking about? I'm only talking about regular season games. The Bengals. If you were to look at how to defend them, the Bengals, now not last year in the AFC title game, were there times when they gave up plays against the run like this one? Yes. In the AFC title game in 2021, I thought the Chiefs went away from the run too often, particularly the jet sweep to McCole Hardman into the boundary. This game that I'm showing you here, the regular season game from 2022, although the Chiefs lost, as I detailed earlier, they figured some things out. They weren't going to be able to hit the Bengals with typical concepts right off the bat. MVS beat Mike Hilton multiple times down the field, as you see an example of it here, which he did in the AFC title game, which again was the difference between winning and losing, if you ask me. It was the matchup that the Chiefs found. What's my point overall as it relates to the Lions? It took the Chiefs 4 games to find this. Now, granted, the matchup, they had just signed MVS last year. The matchup didn't exist the year before. So the possibility exists that the Lions' nickel coverage guys, Brian Branch, CJ Gardner-Johnson, are better than Mike Hilton. That's possible. And I think Mike Hilton's a spectacular football player, to be honest with you. To me, the Lions' chances of winning increase at allowing 24 points or less, period. If you look at what Lou Anarumo was able to do to Mahomes and company, yes, some of it's personnel-based, and this is filmed from the AFC title game, and you'll see Marquez Valdez-Scantling matched up against Mike Hilton. If Mahomes and company find a matchup like this against the Lions, they can win a 27-24 game if the defense for the Lions can generally hold everything else down. If he can't find a matchup like this that he can pick on, and Reed can scheme up those matchups in terms of putting that guy in the slot, if that's where the matchup is, putting that guy at the outside left corner or right corner, however the Lions choose to match up, if you can't give him that one matchup that he can go to, it's going to be a whole lot more difficult for the Chiefs to win this game. I know that the Chiefs are probably going to be favored, don't get me wrong, but I think the reality is if the Lions can go in there and play the brand of defense that is similar to what the Bengals were able to do, and they have the personnel to do it, and have the style to do it in terms of physicality, I think it gives the Lions a better than 60% chance to go in there on the road and get the win in week 1 of the NFL season and show everybody that they're for real. Super brilliant play here. I think you've got a designed late downfield screen where the tight end and the running back are getting out here, and you also have, I think Kelsey is running a route. They all end up somewhere in this area, and MVS, who went in return motion, ends up in the flats. I believe this is an absolute fake look by Mahomes checking downfield. So if you're a Lions fan and you're thinking, you're listening to what I'm saying, you're like, man, this guy thinks we can beat the Chiefs, and you think that you can beat the Chiefs. This is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with somebody who's going to plan a designed late downfield screen. He's doing nothing here. Look, he has Travis Kelce. He could throw the football to Travis Kelce right now. Doesn't do so because he's supposed to throw it behind the line of scrimmage so that the rest of these guys downfield can get out and block. I think it's a designed, delayed screen to a receiver that was on fire that night and that had a matchup advantage against Mike Hilton. I talked about that play particularly in another video. The one that really, broke the Bengals back in terms of recognizing that they couldn't match up was this one right here. They cleared out the space, got the safety, jumping the underneath route, I think by Sky Moore, and you can see what's developing for MVS. Mahomes sees it a little bit late for me. I think this ball should, kind of already be out, but the pocket was kind of disturbed or disrupted there. Do the Lions have the cover people to get this job done? Because that's basically what it comes down to. I don't think that the Chiefs, at this point in time, now granted in the Super Bowl, they turned to the run game against the Eagles, They turned to the run game in order to get the win. Were it not for their ability to run the football, the Eagles are Super Bowl champions right now. And if you're a Chiefs fan, you're listening to me like, man, this guy doesn't respect us at all. I'm giving the Chiefs offensive staff credit. With an injured Mahomes, they created a game plan. They were so smart as a staff. They created a game plan that not only Patrick Mahomes could execute, but their backup quarterback could too. In terms of what they went to in the second half, they went to the run game. Look at some of the stuff that they did. They actually stole a play directly from Ben Johnson's playbook early in the season. Week 1 against the Eagles, the Chiefs used the same exact alignment, the same exact blocking scheme against the Eagles. That's how far back Andy Reid will look, and I suspect and I hope that Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, and his staff has done the same thing. Looked at these Bengals games that I showed you. The best chance to try to hold this team down, this team being the Chiefs, is play them as physical as possible within the rules. At times, will Andy Reid go away from the run game? Yeah, I think he's done that dating back 20 years at times in the NFL. I think the Lions have the corners and safeties to get this job done. The nickel, having multiple guys who can play the nickel gives them great coverage versatility. And as you saw from a couple of the plays there with Kirby Joseph, you've got a guy who can be at the line of scrimmage at the snap and cover the middle of the field brilliantly, tipping away a potential touchdown pass from Aaron Rodgers that, was probably underthrown by a yard. Do you think the Lions offense can score on this Chiefs defense if Chris Jones doesn't play? They're not just going to come in there and run over the Chiefs without Chris Jones. That's not the case. They're missing Jamison Williams. That removes a big play element, clearly. The Chiefs' situation but definitely weakens their ability to disrupt Jared Goff and disrupt the run game, absent Chris Jones. Look, Kansas City won last year without Tyreek Hill, won the Super Bowl. You have to give them credit. They proved that they didn't need to pay a top dollar for a wide receiver. Other teams might, though. But what they got in return was a bunch of young, talented guys, particularly on the defense, across multiple positions who played hard. Then Eric Bieniemy, after winning the second Super Bowl, moves on. Now Chris Jones might not play for this game and another 6 weeks afterwards. There does become a point at which there's just too many losses of high-profile players and or coaches. Andy Reid can coach football, and he's going to score points. But losing Eric Bieniemy could have an impact, if you ask me. If the Lions are able to go to Kansas City and get a win, then the hype is going to multiply exponentially in front of a national TV audience. If you're on social media like I am, you can expect to hear posts declaring the Lions the truth or a bust, probably by halftime. Or that the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl again, or that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid have lost it by letting Eric Bieniemy leave. Chris Jones might not play. We're too reactionary. I like to give ranges, and so that's what I'll do. If Jones doesn't play, and as of this recording, he's not returned, I think the Lions get over that 24-point barrier. I would suspect 20, barring turnovers. Let's start there. Barring turnovers on either side, I think the Lions are in the 24 to 28 point range, maybe 31. That's where I tend to be in terms of my predictions for most teams. And if the defense is able to play to the caliber of the talent they have and in the manner in which I'm comparing with the Bengals, I could see them winning 31-21. I could. If the Chiefs were to get +1 turnovers, then you could be talking about 31-28 Chiefs, 31-24 Chiefs, or maybe 31-21 Chiefs, where the Chiefs get another score late to pull away from a closer game, 3-point game plus 7 points late, an FU touchdown a la Bill Belichick to finish it off. If the Chiefs get +2 in turnovers, I don't think the Lions have much opportunity for real. You could see that last score flipped and even expanded upon. I just think there's too much talent on this Lions roster, too much motivated talent, too much pressure on them that they have to live up to, good pressure, for them to go to Kansas City and get beat up. Ben Johnson's going to bring his best stuff to Kansas City, in my opinion, and he's going to I believe he's going to put the Chiefs' defense on the back foot and attack them, particularly to the boundary and particularly away from the nickel defender. I think they'll be physical on both sides of the ball, or at least that's what their attempt will be. That seems to be the focus under Campbell, Ben Johnson, and Aaron Glenn. If they avoid turnovers completely and limit Mahomes and company to 24 points or less, like I've spent a lot of time talking about, I think you're talking about a better than 60-70% chance to go in there and get the job done on the road. That speaks to me for how talented they are and how great a job Brad Holmes has done in the front office. I don't give predictions. I give ranges because I don't feel it's appropriate to give a prediction unless you feel really, really sure about something. At this point, week 1 of the NFL, I don't know about you, I don't feel comfortable in putting out declarative statements until we see teams play 3 or 4 or 5 games. But I think we all know that the Lions are going to come in there and they're going to try to land the first punch. If you guys enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section, number 1. And if you haven't considered, please, subscribing to my channel, please consider doing so now. If you think other Lions fans, Chiefs fans, or football fans in general would enjoy this content, please consider grabbing a link to it, sharing it somewhere on social media to help my content get more reach.